Hello everyone, and welcome to the English Teacher's Guide to the EDEXCEL GCSE English Literature paper, and we're looking at the unseen poem for the Response to Poetry Unit 1 question, and we're looking at how you can achieve A star. Well, very quickly let me talk about the structure of the exam paper. It's 25% of your total literature grade, 1 hour 45 minute paper, 2 sections A and B. Today we're looking at section A, which is the unseen poem, which is basically testing your ability to analyse a poem you've never seen before. And then section B is a comparison based on one named poem from an anthology and one poem of your choice. Obviously you can be picking a poem from one of the sections that you have been reading, such as classes and collisions or relationships, for instance. Okay, 2 questions for you to see if you've been doing some work before this exam. Task 1. What do you need to do within the question in order to achieve perfect marks, 20 out of 20? So what's it about? What are you being asked to do? And then task 2, what's the method you need to use in order to accomplish this? Pause it very quickly, note down your answer, and then press play to resume. Okay, so this is the mark scheme. It's only for AO2 question 1 in the exam, which means you're only going to get marks for your ability to analyse form, structure and language. Now, to get perfect marks, what you need to be doing is coming up with really intelligent ideas, looking below the surface level, not just saying, for instance, it shows it's cold. Well, obviously this shows that it's penetrated the soul of the person, the world around them seems cold. Now you're looking at perfect marks. You need to make sure, as I said, you cover language, you need to cover form, you need to make sure that you use integrated quotations if you can, not just quote that whole thing, quote only what you need. And you'll also notice that your ability to write clearly, your spelling, punctuation and grammar are used correctly all the way through. But notice it doesn't necessarily say terminology. What is form, structure and language? Well, here are some of the things that you can cover if you've not already done this in class. So for instance, form. What kind of poem is it? Sonnet, ballad, monologue, etc. For form, you can also look at the rhyme scheme. You can look at things like the title. You can look at narrative perspective. You know, who is speaking? Where are they speaking? Is it first, second or third person? All these things are relevant. For structure, rhyme scheme again is evident. How many stanzas? The length of stanzas. Punctuation, is it extended metaphor? All those things there. And obviously language as well. Most of those that you should be familiar with. If not, obviously pause this, note it down. Because if you're going to get perfect marks, you need to make sure you mention form, structure and language, not just 1 or 2. How do we answer it then? Okay, well, this is the method you need, and this is the planning method. So you'll see that obviously foundation pupils will be given some bullet points. You need to make sure that you cover those bullet points in your answers. It's basically giving you ideas for you. However, read the question carefully, underlining key parts. This is the most important part. You know, read through the poem and make sure you understand the basic meaning. What is this poem basically about? Do not worry if you don't know the answer the first time round. You've got 15 minutes to plan this, so you should be looking at reading it again, reading it a third time. I would underline key words. I would then start to look at it stanza by stanza. I would then start to look at it line by line if you need to. You have to do this. This is important. If you don't understand what this poem is about, you're never going to get perfect marks. What I would say though is the poems I pick are 99% of the time fairly straightforward. You have to just start searching for, well, what's the hidden meaning, the deeper meaning, the more implied meaning, and we're going to come to that in a second. Then what you need to do, the question's always going to be the same. How does the writer present their thoughts and feelings about the subject? Well, what you need to do is to think of 3 to 5 answers to this. You know, so it could be, for instance, the writer creates the impression that love is unimportant or full of regret. Now what you're doing is you're kind of looking at a theme. You know, so what does it say about bats? We're going to look at in a second. Well, it shows that bats are loving creatures. Okay. If you're using a theme, an idea to answer the question, now you can analyse form, structure and language. The alternative is you could say they present their thoughts using form, present their thoughts using language or structure. That's fine. That can still get you perfect marks because you're covering all the things a mark scheme needs. You're just limiting yourself a little bit because that point is obviously only going to be about that technique that you're referring to. Once you've decided on your 3 to 5 ideas, depending on whether you feel in the 45 minutes you can write 3, 4 or 5 paragraphs, now you go back to the poem and you analyse in more detail. You now need to find the form, structure and language to prove your point is correct. So rather than just analysing the poem for the sake of analysing it when you first get it, work out the basic meaning, work out the 3 to 5 ways in which the writer presents the subject you're being asked to look at in the question, and then analyse the form, structure and language to prove you are correct. The answering itself. Obviously it's an essay, intro, main body, conclusion. Introduction, very quickly you note down what the poem is asking you to focus on and answer the question directly. No, it presents this idea about bats or this idea about love. Then in your main body you're looking to create 3 to 4, maybe even 5 PE paragraphs which explore the question. Every single paragraph is basically a repetition of itself but with a different idea. Point, evidence, explanation. So in your explanation, obviously you need to make sure you at the first basic level explain how the quote proves your point. Analyse individual words, analyse structure if you can, use alternative views. It's always a good idea to have more than one piece of evidence to prove you are right, because then you're maximising your potential to be perceptive, which means you're fully focusing on the question. Then what you might want to do at the end of each paragraph is evaluate, well, why does the author create this impression? What they're trying to say. Some people, however, leave that for the conclusion. That's entirely up to you. And again, that conclusion is asking you to evaluate why the writer has created this overall impression, and or you might suggest which element you felt was the most important, which idea do you feel was the most important and why. And it's a very quick note, there's no need for historical context, no need for comparison, but obviously we do have to watch our spelling, punctuation and grammar. Now let's look at a question that came up in last summer's exam. Explore how Randall Jarrell presents his thoughts about bats. Done. Nice and simple. Use evidence from your poem to support your answer. Okay, so before we look at the answer itself, let's look at an example here. So this is the poem as you will see it in the exam, and as you can see, what I've done is very clearly I made sure the basic meaning is there, so I know I understand it. Now what you would be doing obviously in your work is be plenty more underlining, plenty more little notes around, little arrows off to prove your points. And you can see I've got my 4 ideas. 1. Babies reliant upon the mother. 2. Bats are amazing creatures. 3. Parents work tirelessly for their children. 4. Parenting is a difficult job. I might have had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then I pick the ones I know I can analyse best. And then you can see I've only really planned point number 1 for this session. But then what I've started to do is once I've got my 4 ideas, I then go back to the poem and I start to find my form, structure and language to prove I'm right. And you can see language, line 2, weakness, vulnerable, innocent. So what I'm going to do is then, that's just a note to me, so I know that I'm going to go back and focus on those. Structure here as well, 1 stanza to describe the 2, so I've noted down this shows that without the mother the baby is nothing. I've also looked at the fact that the baby is the passive part of the sentence, not the active part, which means the mother is always doing things for the baby. Obviously if this was my full example, I would finish all these ideas and have arrows pointing towards the evidence. All I now need to do here, as you can see, is turn my notes into full sentences, and I've got myself a perfect marked essay. I will literally be ticking them off as I go along, and that saves you from doing that inevitable thing we sometimes do in the exams. We get halfway through it, because we haven't planned it, we don't actually know what we're going to write, and that's obviously the worst situation for you. So obviously if you feel you need to pause this and look at the example, then please do so. But here is my answer based on those notes. Questions at the top again. In his poem Bats, Randall demonstrates on a literal level bats are amazing creatures who work tirelessly for their offspring. In a wider sense, the poem also explores parenting in general, demonstrating that children depend totally on a loving mother. There's my answer. I'm telling the marker I know exactly what the question and the poem is about. I'm showing them the ideas that I'm going to cover, and you can also see, rather than just going bats are wonderful creatures, which is true but fairly literal, I'm also looking in a wider sense where actually it shows about parenting skills in general. So here's the first point, and all you're going to basically do is repeat this style 3, 4, 5 times. As mentioned above, Randall shows us that he thinks that babies are totally reliant upon their mothers. That's the point. Doesn't matter if you're getting an A star or a D, nice and simple, make it nice and clear for the marker. They're not going to be searching for marks for you, you have to make it nice and clear. This is immediately evident when the child is described as naked and blind and pale. Notice I'm using only what I need, notice it's integrated in my work as well. The listing, so structure, of the child's vulnerabilities helps to show just how vulnerable the small bat is, as it cannot see where to go and is unable to protect itself from the cold. The reference to the colour of the bat helps to highlight the visible difference between the adult and the child. So contrast, which is structure as well, but imagery, which could represent the baby's innocence. So I'm using alternative ideas, but more likely shows that without age and experience, the child is pale or unable to protect itself from the world. So a more perceptive idea, not just the bat is young. Furthermore, Randall's use of one stanza, so structure, shows that the baby is unable to live alone, so it needs to completely cling, so I'm integrating quotations, which I need to do to get top marks, to the mother to survive. This dependence is also shown by making the baby the passive member of many sentences, and I've got an example in brackets. Her baby, so it's all about the mother, drinks the milk she makes him, so he's passive, he's at the end, he's hanging on, which again helps to show that just like our children, so I'm evaluating now, all babies are vulnerable and need protection. Do that 3 to 4 times. So in that sentence, in that section, I've mentioned structure, I've mentioned language, some of those overlap with form as well. Do that 3 to 4 times, you're covering everything you need, the ideas are perceptive, you'll get A star. Another thought which Randall presents about bats is, so there's how I'm going to start off my next point. Finally, furthermore, get the idea. And then the conclusion. Overall, Randall's presentation of the bat not only helps to highlight the beauty of the creature to readers who may not see rats with wings in this way, but also creates the wider point about the link between the parent and child and how important this is. So there you go. So we've gone through how to plan. We've gone through how to analyse the poems very briefly, and we've gone through how to answer the questions. So, thank you very much. There's a link to help you look at past papers. Good luck with your revision, and please feel free to come back and look at this again if you need to.